Missiles light up the night sky. Oil tankers move through one of the most sensitive shipping corridors on Earth. And global markets react within minutes. Yet despite rising tensions, there is no immediate ceasefire. From the outside, that can seem irrational. If escalation is so dangerous, why doesn't the conflict stop? But the more important question may actually be different. Not why the war continues, but why stopping now could weaken one side, more than continuing. Because in geopolitics, wars rarely end when violence becomes costly. They end when leverage changes, and to understand that, we need to look at how wars actually end. Here is the paradox. A ceasefire reduces immediate risk, but it also freezes the balance of power. If a government believes that balance is unfavorable, ending the conflict too early can lock that disadvantage into place. So instead of rushing toward peace, leaders sometimes pursue another strategy: endure pressure, apply pressure, and reshape the negotiation environment. Which raises an important question. How do countries actually create leverage in conflicts like this? Analysts often describe this dynamic using a simple framework: the ceasefire leverage model. The idea is that bargaining power in conflict is shaped by three kinds of pressure: military pressure, economic pressure, and political pressure. When these pressures shift, the balance of negotiation shifts as well. And once that balance crosses a certain threshold, a ceasefire suddenly becomes possible. But until that threshold is reached, peace can actually be strategically premature. The current confrontation sits inside a long-running regional rivalry. For years it unfolded through shadow conflict, cyber attacks, covert operations, proxy warfare, maritime incidents. But recently, the confrontation has become more direct. Missiles, drones, retaliatory strikes. And the region where this is happening is strategically critical. Nearly 20% of global oil trade passes through the Strait of Hormuz. When tensions rise here, the consequences rarely stay local. Energy prices move, shipping routes become risky, and global markets react. But Iran's strategy is not built around one decisive battle. Instead, it relies on distributed pressure. Missile and drone systems extend military reach across long distances. Regional allied groups expand the geographic scope of confrontation. Cyber operations allow disruption, without direct battlefield escalation. And pressure near strategic shipping routes can influence global energy markets. Each of these actions may appear limited on its own, but together they create a layered system of pressure, a strategy designed to influence the balance without triggering full-scale war. But this approach raises another question. If both sides keep applying pressure, why doesn't the conflict spiral into full war? This is where strategy becomes complicated, because leaders face a classic credibility dilemma. If a government stops fighting too quickly, it risks appearing weak, but escalating too far can trigger consequences no one can control. So leaders must balance two competing goals: avoiding wider war and maintaining deterrence. This is why conflicts often continue, even when the risks are obvious, not because leaders want escalation, but because stopping too early can damage credibility. When both sides face this dilemma, conflicts often settle into a pattern. Analysts sometimes describe it as a deterrence signaling equilibrium. One strike leads to another. Each response attempts to restore deterrence. Signals are answered with counter-signals. Neither side wants to escalate too far, but neither side wants to appear weak, so escalation becomes limited, yet persistent. Instead of decisive victory, the conflict stabilizes into a tense equilibrium, and these cycles can continue far longer than outsiders expect. Time itself can also become a strategic tool. Extended confrontations reshape diplomacy. Economic costs accumulate. International actors begin pushing for negotiations. External powers may step in as mediators, and allies reconsider their positions. If leaders believe that time improves their negotiating leverage, delaying a ceasefire becomes a calculated decision. In this sense, time is not simply passing. Time becomes bargaining power. Which brings us back to the original question. Why might Iran delay a ceasefire? Because in conflicts like this, stopping too early can weaken negotiating leverage. Leaders often wait until they believe the balance of pressure has shifted. Only then does a ceasefire become strategically acceptable. So the real question was never simply why the conflict continues. The real question is this: when does the balance of leverage finally change? Because in geopolitics, wars rarely end when violence becomes unbearable. They end when the timing of peace becomes advantageous. And until that moment arrives, conflicts can continue far longer than anyone expects.